Good afternoon. Oh, it was very loud. Is it okay? Good afternoon and welcome to Estrad, both you here in the room and you who are watching on the web. I also want to say welcome to Sarah Jack, a new professor at the Stockholm School of Economics. I think this is one of the first public presentations you have since you started, right? Yeah, we look forward to that. But first I would like to say a few words about Estrad, the organization that arranged these lectures. We disseminate research-based knowledge through this Estrad lecture series and other events. Through the magazine Estrad, you will find a magazine with an article about Sarah here, so take it and read. And also our website with web TV and a lot of articles of innovation, entrepreneurship, and SMEs. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest news. Today's lecture will start soon. I don't like this, sorry. After about 45 minutes, we will have a fika break. And after the break, Sarah will talk about practice and impact. And there will be time for questions before we finish at 5. I would like to thank our main partners, Tillväxtverket and Vinnova, and also our partner, Länsstyrelsen i Stockholm. So that was all for me. The stage is yours, Sarah. Give her a big hand.
I hope this all works. That's not too loud, is it? Okay. So, first of all, it sounds very loud to me. Anyway, first of all, can I just start by thanking Magnus and the team at Esbray for inviting me along to speak with you today. I joined SSE in September 2017, and prior to this, I was based at Lancaster University, and before that, Aberdeen University in Scotland. So I've come here from the UK, but I suppose in Scotland, I'm from the very north, so I feel kind of at home in Stockholm. I'm delighted to now be in Stockholm, and thank you all for being so welcoming. And to give some background, prior to joining academia, I worked for a company which manufactured chest freezers, and the business had been founded by a husband and wife team. He was the innovator who identified the need for the product, and through an inquisitive mind created a chest freezer of which 92% was manufactured in-house. And his wife was the business brain behind the product, and through her skills and aptitude, took the product basically to market. And miles from anywhere, the business survived and thrived on the very north coast of Scotland. And in a village with a population of less than 800 people, where the only other local employer were big public organisations like the Atomic Energy Authority. So I was very fortunate in that during the 2 years that I was with the business, I saw the business go through a rapid period of growth, which led us to doubling the workforce from around 180 to 360 full-time employees. We're increasing production up to 16,000 products per week, which we then exported to over 100 countries throughout the world. And throughout this time, we also saw the business supply a good proportion of all the major kind of manufacturers in the world, including companies like Zanussi, Electrolux, Iceland Whirlpool, Pepsi Cola, and Mars. So when I decided to embark on an academic career, I was keen to continue looking at the business development side of entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurs build relationships which allow them to develop activities which are sustained over time. And on narrowing down my topic, I ended up focusing more specifically on networks and entrepreneurship and how entrepreneurs drew on their social networks to really kind of develop their business activity. And so my interest in entrepreneurship and how businesses and communities are sustained over time has kind of always really been there, I suppose. Not least because so much of the research that I do has involved organisations which face dilemmas and challenges which they then often encounter when trying to expand their business to protect it from external factors. And such dilemmas and challenges also relate to the context in which the organisations often survive and thrive. So my particular interests are in the relationships which are built and maintained and mobilise for entrepreneurship and business development. And what this boils down to really is that I'm interested in some very simple questions which relate to how and why. And these how and why questions are particularly well suited, I think, for entrepreneurship because they help us to appreciate and understand it and the practices in which people engage and the real situations which they encounter to develop their businesses and sustain them over time. So it's the connections to people, places, and situations that matter to me. And I think that's probably quite a nice way to kind of sum it up. So what I thought today was, or moving forward, I'll give you some further background, which lets you kind of understand where I come at, I suppose, from a research perspective. And I thought it might be helpful to give you an overview of the various topics which I am currently looking at, and also the context at which I'm looking at these in. And you can see there's entrepreneurship and social innovation, which I'll come back to later on, and which I've got some handouts about as well. Entrepreneurship, social context, learning, education, networks, and family business, but from a very kind of entrepreneurship perspective. And then also the different contexts which I look at these elements in. And just for extra information, I thought it might also be helpful for you to see a kind of further breakdown of the research projects that I am engaged in, to give you a kind of feel as well of the breadth of activities, but also the depth, and the fact that most of these involve some kind of international collaboration. So I suppose that kind of gives you some idea of where I'm coming from. So for today, what I'm going to try and focus on are the kind of questions that you were given. Why are social relationships and networks critical assets for entrepreneurs? How can universities support entrepreneurs in a better way? And how can we understand entrepreneurship in different contexts? So what I'm going to kind of concentrate more on today is various projects which I've been engaged in. And then in the second part of my presentation, I'll then move to show more directly the projects in which I've been involved or which I've seen work directly with entrepreneurs to show how we can impact on the business community. And I've chosen the specific papers for today because they work directly with areas which engage practice, but also policy, especially for building entrepreneurship in regions. So I'm going to give you a flavour of my research, and then I'll move to the more kind of practice element as well. So the first project involves looking at a policy-led network, which was really about development for building regions. And here there's some key papers which have come through from a couple of projects which I've been involved in. So I decided to take that stream of work more specifically for today. And the first deals with the resources and intermediaries, and the people who are basically working between the different bodies, which I'll come on to explain as well in a minute. So what it argues is that the importance of clusters for regional economic development, and I'm sure that you've all heard about the clusters in Silicon Valley, etc., has long kind of been known. And if you look at the work of Carl Wallenberg, who's sometimes, I think he's presenting to you next month or the month after, and Goran Lindqvist from SSC, they've done a lot of interesting work, or some interesting work around this as well. And a key advantage of the clustering of sector-specific firms within a particular geographical region is that it offers greater opportunity for the sharing of knowledge. And this in turn is seen to lead to an increase in local productivity, innovation, and the competitive advantage of regions. However, knowledge exchange is very dependent upon the existence of social networks between regional firms. And this is understood to be one reason why some clusters perform better than others. So given that the creation of social networks between firms is important, policy has for over 2 decades looked to facilitate the creation and expansion of networking, opportunities to support regional growth. And you've seen this throughout Europe, but also within specific regions as well. And the intermediaries tend to act as middlemen, who play a key role in encouraging really the creation of new networking opportunities between firms for the purposes of facilitating new collaborations and knowledge exchange. And given the important role that intermediaries play, the choice of intermediary to support knowledge exchange is very critical. However, what seems especially important is that the chosen intermediary has the right network and knowledge resources to facilitate knowledge exchange between regional firms. But despite current research pointing to the important role of intermediaries in facilitating new relationships between firms, there's a need for more work on factors which contribute to the effectiveness of intermediaries in their creating links between organisations. And this is important given that policymakers are increasingly relying on intermediaries such as local universities or regional government agencies or facilities like this today to help develop new knowledge exchange initiatives. And recent interest in regional knowledge exchange and the importance of networks between firms has turned to the important role of these middle people. There are, however, two kind of areas which need further investigation to help policymakers choose the right individual to support regional initiatives. And first, research so far on intermediaries has focused largely on their role in the expansion of existing regional networks for knowledge exchange. And policymakers, however, have also been relying on intermediaries such as universities or regional government agencies for the creation of new networks. And given intermediaries' networks and knowledge resources are essential for the expansion of existing networks, there's really a kind of need to further understand how these and other resources underpin the successful creation of new networks for knowledge exchange. But also there's a large body of work which suggests that the creation of regional networks are underpinned by relationships between individuals within the region. And this is important because so much work that has been done around the role of intermediaries tends to focus on organisational resources rather than the social networks and resources of key individuals. And the role of key individuals and the importance of individual resources in contributing to organisational goals has gained much ground in recent years, but understanding the role of key individuals and the resources that they are able to access and leverage to contribute to the success of regional networks for knowledge exchange is incredibly important. So the paper is based on an in-depth study of the successful creation and expansion of a policy-led intermediary network for the information and communication technology kind of sector, so the IT sector, I suppose you could say. And the study provides an important contribution to extending understanding of the choice of intermediary organisation and the role that these intermediaries play in both creating and expanding regional knowledge and exchange networks. But the study also contributes to, more broadly, I suppose, to the body of research on factors underpinning the success of these regional networks. And the ICT sector is an industry which has been shown to benefit considerably from regional networks for knowledge exchange. And at the time of this particular study, which was carried out in the UK government was very much pushing the development of agencies towards regional economic growth and development. And the ICT sector has been recognised as a kind of fruitful area for the development of these knowledge exchange networks to support regional economic development. So this network was initiated by the Regional Development Agency, which brought on board a local university and also a kind of a city council, I suppose, a municipality, as you would probably call them here, who have both worked previously on projects with the IT sector. And these three intermediaries were to act as institutional intermediaries who would leverage the knowledge and networks to facilitate new opportunities for regional knowledge exchange and collaboration. So that was kind of the key thing. And driven by a recent UK government policy to encourage regional development, they had developed an economic development strategy to support that particular sector. And this sector within the region was estimated to be worth £16 billion, with 31,000 companies employing 320,000 staff. So it was a big, big thing. And it generated 16% of the region's gross value added, employed 10.6% of its workforce, and formed the second largest regional cluster of IT firms in Europe. And the local university was already heavily engaged in supporting the IT sector through a range of initiatives to promote knowledge exchange and innovation. And the aim of the IT knowledge network was to create new links between firms that would enable the sharing of new knowledge, new technologies, and best practice. And at the time of the study, the network had been formed for over 4 years and had successfully achieved its goals of creating new opportunities for knowledge exchange and new collaborations. But it had also expanded the network to include over 100 regional businesses. So quarterly activity and output reports for regional, national and European funding bodies indicated the extent of their knowledge transfer activities, as well as the regional increase in sales and jobs. So the network in this study was already meeting targets and generating a positive outcome for the region. The research was thus conducted, I suppose, at a very timely stage in its development. And the focus of the study was on the resources that combined to facilitate the creation and expansion of this new regional ICT network. And all three kind of intermediaries who were involved were embedded in the region and had strong networks with regional firms. So what we show through the work that was carried out is that policymakers really need to understand how the choice of intermediary organisation may contribute to their success. And while studies before have explored key factors which underpin success or failure of these kind of policy-initiated network formations, few have considered the resources that intermediaries will have and how they kind of combine them to impact on the creation of networks. So this study focused on unique resource combinations that underpinned the successful creation and expansion of the regional network for that particular sector. So the findings not only highlight the relevance of intermediary organisations, but importantly point to the significance of key individuals within those organisations. And a relevant question then becomes how policymakers are able to identify who such individuals might be, because the individual has to be right. But also the importance of the value created through a combination of intermediary and individual resources cannot be developed in a short period of time. The development of such resources can be specific to a particular regional context. So the region matters, but also the individual. And if you think again, I mean, it does kind of link quite nicely back to what Magnus does here and the whole kind of intermediary and the setting up of the group and how it's developed over time. So the next one, next kind of piece of work that I'll refer to also deals with the intermediary, but looks at motivations and challenges of intermediaries and entrepreneurs, again engaged in the formation of a networking group for the sector. And it was based on the same kind of data set, really. But the starting point here is that the formation of industry networks for small and medium-sized enterprises has been strongly encouraged by policymakers throughout the world. And wherever you look, there seems to have been this big drive, it's about just bringing people together and things just seem to happen, sometimes just out of kind of thin air, but we'll come to that in another paper that I'll talk about later on. So too often we've kind of been inspired, I suppose, by the economic success of Silicon Valley, and policymakers see such networks as an initial step to the creation of economic clusters and thus as a mechanism to support economic growth and prosperity, by replicating conditions that are perceived to support substantial achievement. And often such networks are created regionally around similar or related technologies with an embedded infrastructure of resources and support that tends to promote the interests of the whole network and its industry. And due to the benefits that industry network formation is said to bring to the wider economy, a key aspect of policymakers' strategy is to use these as a mechanism for nurturing a socio-economic environment that allows entrepreneurs and the small business that they build to really flourish, as a way for entrepreneurs to build dynamic informal networks with other types of organisations that support individual activities and those of an industry, to bring about cluster formation and participation by encouraging inter-firm collaboration. But while the formation of industry networks, commonly referred to as clusters, is seen as a mechanism to create an entrepreneurial environment and bring about economic prosperity, trying to influence firm behaviour by encouraging entrepreneurs to share ideas, knowledge and expertise through building and developing networks can be questioned in particularly three ways. First, it's commonly accepted that the development of networks relies on aspects which to a large extent are socially constituted and dependent on social cohesion and social interaction over time. And this is increasingly evident from work which is focused on Silicon Valley and similar settings where factors related to social context and time have been identified as being very critical for their development. And second, the formation of industry networks tends to involve intermediaries who have an economic or regional policy agenda to be met through hard and fast results. And this often means ensuring that objectives are met very quickly and are demonstrated through numeric reasoning, which really overlooks the informal and softer side of both networks and entrepreneurship. But also, while industry networks tend to be driven by economic need, often related to serving a specific industry or technology requirement, feature or characteristics, Networks revolve around an organisation, a stakeholder or individual, with their development being driven by personal needs and goals of the entrepreneur. So while policymakers tend to be under the impression that industry networks can be built, a more realistic view is that they tend to emerge and self-organise through common needs, through common requirements and common goals. So this work really kind of broadens understanding about the formation of networking groups, and it addresses the question, what are the motivations and challenges of engaging in policy-driven network-forming activities? So the findings, again, are presented from a qualitative study which considered the motivations and challenges of both intermediaries and entrepreneurs engaged in network-building activities in the northwest of England in the UK. And the research deliberately took a dual perspective by interviewing both intermediaries from a range of local, regional government agencies, but also universities, as well as entrepreneurs in the small kind of IT sector. And the study is based on 14 in-depth semi-structured interviews that recorded the interactions and experiences of intermediaries and entrepreneurs who were actively involved in forming regional networking groups. And the objective of these groups was to provide a forum for networking and to bring together like-minded individuals involved within this sector. So this work provides valuable insights into the challenges that policymakers face in facilitating the formation of an entrepreneurial environment, but in the form of a networking group. And the study extends our understanding about the formation and development of a network driven by policy initiatives as follows. So first of all, it demonstrates how there is little communication of expectations between intermediaries and entrepreneurs. So neither party knows really what to expect from these types of events. Intermediaries allocate resources, creating an environment based on what they think entrepreneurs need. But entrepreneurs have to discover how that environment can work for their business and what opportunities may exist. Second, it shows how the mechanisms that intermediaries use to create an environment whose aim is unclear can lead to entrepreneurs focusing on short-term, hard and fast results. And these mechanisms can constrain the entrepreneur's ability to focus on the longer-term development of social relations, which are really critical for discovering and realising opportunities. So policymakers and entrepreneurs need to work in partnership to really understand mutual needs, to ensure that resources are being targeted appropriately and in a manner which is very conducive to supporting an entrepreneurial environment in the longer term, because that's what we should really be aiming for, is the longer term. So the next paper I want to kind of mention is about an emerging network and patterns of change. And what we do here is report the development of a network for new entrepreneurs, which was first established in the northeast of Scotland by a local government agency, so within the UK again. And this provided a kind of natural way to chart network emergence, change, and evolution. And what we show is how a network structure really shifts from being calculative to effective ties and demonstrate the importance of social ties for the operation of a network. And what we feel is that if we try to understand the network as an organisation, we can count linkages, situate connections, and build up a map of the network. But we then know very little about the nature of the process of networking. And such maps of networks are fairly static and difficult to combine with process approaches. And it seems then that we have this kind of research dilemma. Should we study networking, networks, or network change? And network change kind of offers the possibility of charting both structure and process. So what we did here was look to understand network change by examining how and why the network changed over time. So we became aware of the existence of this new network when one of the authors of this particular paper, Susan, joined the group as a student as a way of becoming better acquainted with embryonic entrepreneurship. So her role at that point was very much participant as observer. Now, within a few months, she was asked to join the committee and eventually took over the role of treasurer. And at this point, the research group realised it had the opportunity to really study the formation and development of a network. Now, fortunately for us, Susan had kept very detailed accounts of her involvement so that when we decided to make this a formal case study, we had a written record of events, as well as her kind of recollection of events. So we kind of had this more rounded understanding, I suppose. Susan had access to minutes, members' records and correspondence, attendance sheets and key secondary sources. And this view provided qualitative and quantitative data about members' perceptions of the network. And later, when the local enterprise company declared its intention to withdraw financial support, Susan was asked to undertake a formal review of the network to establish really whether it was worth continuing. So this network was created by a local government agency as a forum for individuals who were considering business startup to share their business ideas. And the forum complied with the strategic objectives of the agency and that it would serve as a catalyst for new business startups and was a much formalized top-down approach to networking. So simply creating an arena where like-minded people could kind of come together, receive and exchange ideas and information. But this was a very instrumental approach, and this instrumental approach appeared to be premised on the assumption that a network was based on transactions, albeit with potential for reciprocity and mutualized self-interest. So although originally highly artificial, and you can kind of see this, I thought I'd show you a couple of diagrams which we'd kind of pulled out from this work, in the sense that the network was manufactured, a top-down creation. The network quickly took on a meaning and a purpose of its own. The nature of ties changed from being purely calculative. Ownership and organisation of the network was moved from the enterprise company and invested in the network members. So the network eventually had changed completely in structure, in members, purpose, and the bonds between members. Self-interest had given way to joint interest. Network membership benefits were described in terms of mutual support, and transactional benefits were almost entirely replaced by deferred reciprocity. So network links became affective ties which were built upon social relationships. And here's another one which kind of shows how they changed as well over the time. So what we found was that the agency performed an important broker role, providing an extensive network of contacts, which was key in marketing the forum, organising speakers, providing added value for members, and facilitating networking opportunities. However, latterly, the agency perceived networking to entail name badges, membership directories, notice boards, and a networking event on a big scale with kind of checked tablecloths, candles, wines, and cheeses. But these were really simply mechanisms which facilitated the act of networking and were unlikely to promote a positive response in entrepreneurs. So the government agency was either not aware of the significance of interaction or simply did what they could in ways that matched their strategic objectives. And what is evident is that it may not be possible to create a real entrepreneurial network in this way. Networks are really about the people within them and are operated by the people through a networking process, which itself is a relational dimension. So these characteristics and processes cannot be imposed or created artificially. They just emerge. Yet over time, the network did evolve into something the members found very useful. And when this network was only about opportunity-driven ties, many of the members became involved in transforming it from a resource-based view. And change was reflected in the network content and structure, which constantly shifted to fit its members' needs. And it's kind of argued that networking involves expanding one's circle of trust, and that this involves nurturing casual weak ties into strong ties. And this appeared to be the process that we observed. And what seemed to make this particular network was the interactions, and these were based on social factors, affinity, shared attitudes, but also trust. So what we would argue from this particular work is that while networks may emerge from a rational, instrumental concern to extend resources, the bonding process that characterises how networks work is less about reciprocity of resources, but more about social exchange, mutual understanding, and building respect and opportunities for the exchange of knowledge. Now, the next project which I'm going to mention is slightly different and really is about what I would term embedded entrepreneurship and the role of the entrepreneur, and that's how the kind of group would describe it as well. Now, this work looks at the role of the entrepreneur in the community, and it's also very concerned with the moral and ethical dilemmas that entrepreneurs can face in doing the right thing for the community as well as their ventures. And within this work, we argue that entrepreneurship arises in places that it's very socially situated and extends beyond the economic domain, but that entrepreneurship necessarily involves some novel recombining of resources. Now, for this particular piece of work, the unit of analysis is entrepreneurship, but in 2 communities in Northwest Ireland, and I'm sure from the previous slide, I've given you some indications anyway, that you're all been aware of the troubles that Northern Ireland experienced in the past. So it was against this kind of context that we were working here. So our unit of analysis was 2 communities in Northwest Ireland. And both places have a long history of small-scale farming, manufacturing and processing of textiles, auto parts and foodstuffs. And both these communities were really on the edge, the periphery, which is very much too often forgotten. And between 1987 and 2000, these communities had almost full employment after an American clothing manufacturer's $200 million investment in a local business created 3,000 jobs. And the local business, which had been a family business, was looking to extend its international activity and saw that this investment was the way forward for the business and its survival, which they saw meaning they had to extend across borders. So to build the business, to keep the community going, they saw themselves as having to take it abroad in some way. So this was the way that they felt was the kind of mechanism to do that. So the company Fruit of the Loom moved in, bought the company, and times were good. And doing so created a huge economic boom. As I said, times were good, and the communities were absolutely thriving. However, by 2008, these jobs were lost through a combination of the American manufacturer withdrawing its investment to relocate branch plants to other parts of the world. And these actions, combined with the general worldwide economic downturn, brought with it a declining economic condition, to the extent that the community could then be described as depleted, suffering from a lost sense of identity and purpose. It also didn't seem to believe in its own worth and its own capacity to actually change things. So it was left in both the need of social and economic regeneration. And at the same time, these places were very tired from their troubled pasts, passed over, in post-industrial modernity, and had exhausted their resources, and seemed to have really lost their identity and purpose. And while it began to rebuild, it did so through a recombination of social resources, which we conceived as an entrepreneurial process. But more importantly, what the work we did showed was that entrepreneurship through the community has an ability to recreate. So what you found was that there were key people within this community, and their pictures are kind of there, who really kind of decided to get a grip of the situation and change the situation for the people and the community. The chap at the bottom especially, John, he had been one of the owners of the original business, and I think he felt a real sense of guilt at what had happened, the fact that they had sold out to this large organisation who overnight had really kind of brought the community to its knees. So there was a real sense of the need to do something. And they did that very well by working with people in the community to build and develop particular kind of business activities which supported the regeneration in very different ways. So we saw how entrepreneurship through the community had the ability to recreate, renew and refine a purposeful identity for places and their future. But kind of reflecting back on the work that we did there was that the impact of the desire for business development, which created much of its boom and bust within this particular area, and entrepreneurs moving in and entrepreneurs moving out. So while entrepreneurship can create wealth, employment and benefits for communities and nations, it can also create challenges and issues which local communities especially have to deal with when things don't really work out. So in the cases reported here, the decision to withdraw from the community and move manufacturing to another location, it really did lead to what can be described as a depleted community, and a community that was very much on its knees, a place which experienced a spiralling of economic decline and a host of associated social problems. However, what this particular work also showed was how local entrepreneurs grasped the situation and working with it are really turning it around very successfully. And primarily this is because of their need to build and sustain the community. It's their home, it's where they live, it's where they belong, it's where their families grew up, and therefore they want to make it work. And if you take this kind of study, I suppose it raises a number of interesting issues, but not necessarily in a traditional way. But it also raises challenges, which seem to me anyway important and critical to extending knowledge and understanding. But they also kind of raise interesting points for how people work in practice and deal with the situations they encounter. And this last project that I spoke of showed very clearly that the local entrepreneurs felt a real sense of responsibility to their community. But it was this that drove them to get engaged by looking at building activities for entrepreneurs and others to very much engage in. So if we take this kind of wider view, it seems to me to be critical that through research we ask relevant questions which are linked to research, education and practice, and it's the practice bit that I want to pick up on as well. And there's a range of interesting issues around things like sustainable business development and entrepreneurship over time, all of which impact on how we educate students as future leaders for managing, thriving and thinking globally. And all are also relevant to the issues, challenges and realities that entrepreneurs and those engaged with businesses really have to face. And I think, is that time for a break, or do you want me to carry on? Carry on? Okay. Right, so. Coffee's not arrived yet. Okay, so what I want to do now is kind of move completely through to this kind of project here, which I could kind of explain a bit more the background to. So recent engagements with a number of colleagues has informed my thinking around kind of elements and how we engage with practice, but also how we make our students ready for managing at a global level, but in a much more kind of responsible way. And in a way which engages with sustainable business development agendas in a positive way, while also creating forward-looking thinkers. So in part, this is what also attracted me to engage with the successful Horizon 2020 bid, which is titled Social Innovation in Marginalised Rural Areas, also known as SIMRA, which I'm currently working on with a former colleague of mine, Sophie Al-Khalid, back in Lancaster University, but also this Recirculate project, which I'll explain. I'll go into these much more now, but both of these fit with the global challenges of today, and I'm sure that you're all aware about this kind of drive now to dealing with the global challenges and the issues that people really are facing, the world is facing, that we're kind of in it together, really. So, Recirculate. Now, Recirculate is a global challenge research fund project, which has a total value of £6.8 million. And it's to run over 4 years. And it's run out of the university that I was at previously, whereby we just received the money as I was on the move. But I've kept a role within that project because I really wanted to be a part of it. So I'll show you the website. Let's try and see if the link works. Yeah, here we go. So this here is basically the project, and it's all around driving eco-innovation in Africa and capacity building for a safe circular water economy. And Recirculate basically will support kind of new partnership-based approaches to enable African researchers to grow impact through working with and for their communities. And it's all about developing robust, durable and equitable partnerships with researchers. So what we've decided is, or the way that we're approaching this, is rather than just going into a country and doing some research and then walking away, we're very much working with the local community to build the local community and to work with us to the extent that we are taking them to where we are based as well, and working with them on knowledge exchange activities. So I suppose it's like a solution-focused research. The project will deliver innovative solutions to pressing problems around water use and its safety. So it will join up the different ways in which water sustains communities, from sewage disposal to energy generation and water used in food production. And solving these kind of problems, and water is such a big problem, it demands new approaches to research and how, for example, research and practice is translated to meet the needs of communities across Africa. So this particular project combines excellence, I suppose, in scientific research and things like environmental science, crop science, engineering, microbiology, social science, and also management research in terms of learning and knowledge exchange. And across partners and across disciplines, and working with business and other research. And the intention is to co-design, and it's all about co-designing to deliver appropriate solutions for Africa. And what it will do is build on cutting-edge solutions to address the global challenges around safe and sustainable water use. So the knowledge exchange will bring the people who are very much engaged in the forward-thinking research side of it with the people who are very much engaged with working with the communities in partnership. So it's all about the knowledge exchange. So across partners and across disciplines and working with business and other research users, we'll kind of co-design this element of bringing about the kind of safe and sustainable water use. So Recirculate also includes a substantial training element, which is very much focused on training events in Ghana and 6 to 8 week residences. So the residences involve bringing individuals to the university to work with them, which helps them as well share ideas between them. And it's this whole idea as well of eco-innovation, which delivers the goals of sustainable and equitable societies and economies, including sustainable development. And eco-innovation is a real route to delivering the kind of green economy, which the World Bank estimates has a global value of $3.4 trillion in 2015 and is predicted to grow to more than $8 trillion by 2025. So it's this real kind of partnership element that is the key thing. Do you want me to stop? Okay, right. We'll take a break now for a coffee. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Now it's time for Sarah again. Please take your seats.
I understand we've reduced the volume a bit now, have we? Is that okay? Okay. Oops. Is it still too loud, is it? I'll try to move this away, see if that makes any... Is that better? Is that better? Yeah? Sorry, I feel as though I was shouting at you before. Okay, so I'm going to pick up where I left off. I've kind of finished with the Recirculate project, and I'm now going to tell you about CIMRA, which is very much around social innovation in marginalised rural areas. And this is a project which is, it's a European project, and it's around 6 million euros, and I'm working on it with a former colleague, Sophie Alcalat, whose main kind of area of research is around kind of the refugee crisis and gender. And so this is a 48-month project, and its purpose is social innovation in marginalised rural areas. So it's a European Horizon 2020 research and innovation programme is where it's kind of come through from. And yeah, it's getting quite exciting now. Hang on a minute, I'll get this, see if we can get this link up just so you can get a view of the website. There's Sophie right at the end. Oh, it's not up. Hang on. No, it's not coming up. Ah, there we go. Okay. So it's around social innovation in marginalised rural areas, funded by the European Union, as I mentioned before. And what CIMRA basically is looking to do is to advance understanding of social innovation and innovative governance in agriculture, forestry, and rural development, but also how to boost them, particularly in marginalised rural areas across Europe, with a focus on the Mediterranean region particularly, where there's limited evidence of outcomes and supporting conditions. Now, there's this thing within the project called Innovation Actions, and that's where a lot of the project is focused, particularly at the moment. And it's enabling relevant actors in marginal rural areas to test and exploit their potential for social innovation, with the aim of realising impacts in the territory and the market, in businesses' investment opportunities, and also in building capacity within local governments. So I'm going to try and go now to the second link on the slide. Let's see if it works. Yeah, so this here's a copy of the brochure, which is quite hot off the press, I think, as well. So it's just recently been designed, and I brought copies along with me today as well, so you can have a look at kind of all the partners that are involved in the project. And, you know, it breaks it down as well as to what it's actually looking at and why it's doing. So in the demonstration sites, depending on the context and specific actions, these innovation actions will include the organisation of periodic networking events to encourage interested actors to present, learn about, discuss and initiate innovative and kind of intersectorial actions for rural development. And the creation of marketplaces, physical and virtual, for social innovation projects, and the start-up or establishment of new networks amongst local actors. So that's kind of really the focus at the end of the day. So if I go back here to the slides, hopefully, way. So this is the one that we are primarily engaged in. I thought I'd tell you about the innovative action that we're kind of really driving, and especially Sophie, who's been behind gathering the data and everything and kind of going out to see the business and everything. So the innovative action, which is really driven by Sophie, is looking at assisting socially disadvantaged women in developing successful business initiatives. And the owner of this thing called the Growing Club, which is also referred to as the Sewing Club, but I'll come into that in a moment, is a woman who carried out, or who did her MBA at Lancaster University, so it's within the area. And the innovative action, in a nutshell, it's an innovative action in Lancashire and Cumbria. It's a not-for-profit organisation which provides an alternative model business training and coaching for women entrepreneurs who've been overlooked or dismissed by business support services because they run their business from home to fit around the personal circumstances. Let's see if we can get this link here to come up. So the programme is mainly designed for women. That's not coming up on the screen now. Oh, here we go. From socially disadvantaged backgrounds, due to circumstances such as being stuck in low-paid work, living on benefits, struggling with a disability or primary care responsibility, and recovering from domestic violence. But the innovative action also supports women refugees who've recently arrived into Lancashire. So this innovative action has basically two kind of back-to-back courses. The first course is what's referred to as the Sewing Club. And it's really the first stage of the project or the process. And it's aimed at really kind of exploring the women's skills, their confidence, support systems, and what it means to really run a business. And women completing, sorry, I can't see it here, so I'm just kind of going up and down. So women who are kind of completing the Sewing Club are then ready to start a business and can later feed into the Growing Club, which is a programme which takes the business to its next stage with the input and support from other women who are running businesses to make sure that the business has the best possible chance of growing. So the aim is really to provide business training and marketing tools to sustain the development of small entrepreneurship initiatives in the local economy, and for returning actively into the local economy, and for reducing their dependence on government subsidies. So the establishment of this innovative action will help the marginalised or rural disadvantaged community improve the local economy and ensure the social integration of vulnerable women and their families into society. Now, the next project that I want to talk about is called the Wave 2 Growth Hub Programme. Now, this was a project which was funded at Lancaster University by what was referred to as the Regional Growth Fund, which was a government growth fund which was set up to support cities in creating growth hubs for their areas to promote economic growth and work with local businesses, providing them with access to a national network of resources. And events and knowledge sharing initiatives, which is particularly where Lancaster fitted into this whole programme, and especially the department that I was with at the time, which was the Department of Entrepreneurship, Strategy and Innovation, were designed and organised by the Knowledge Exchange and Research Group, in conjunction with programme partners from the Government's Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, and also the Cabinet's Office on City Policy Unit, again of the UK Government. So Lancaster University played two distinct and innovative roles in the programme, as programme managers and as export support to programme development. And this was really a kind of first for universities in the UK, and the programme demonstrates the dynamic role that universities, and especially their business schools, can play in the UK's growth agenda. I don't know, I might actually just miss that. I think there's, yeah, I'll maybe just give that one I missed that link. I take it the slides are going to be available anyway, so anyone who wants to go and check the links can do so. But I think there's probably enough information on there for you to get a gist of what's happening. So the Wave 2 Growth Hub programme, which was led by Lancaster University, brought online what was called 15 growth hubs around the UK. And the timeline that you'll see, if you have a look at the website, reflects the milestones of the journey, so what was done over time. And Lancaster's university work on this programme helped to support thousands of businesses and the economy. And its management school's Wave 2 Growth Hub programme, which was what it was really called, was also awarded an Academy of Management, which is kind of the creme de la creme body which overlooks the whole kind of management field, I suppose, from a research perspective. It received their Committee Research Centre runner-up impact award. So that was a big thing for the management school to be awarded this for the knowledge exchange activity that they were engaged in. And then I've kind of mentioned impact. And what I really want to do now is to move across to speak more about impact. And particularly how the UK is kind of developing that impact agenda and what it means for what we do. And in the UK, we tend to be measured as academics for everything, for our teaching now, in terms of the research that we produce, but also in terms of the extent that we engage with practice, which isn't a bad thing, I don't think. I think we should be kind of going that way and, you know, showing what we are delivering for the communities with which we engage. And the department that I was in produced 2 impact cases which were rated as 4-star, which was is the top that you can get for this, which brings money. So delivering these kind of impact cases, and especially at that level, brings money to the university, which is obviously a good thing. And the 2 that we were involved in as a department were the technology-focused SMEs and the LEAD programme, which I'll go on and discuss in a bit more depth now as well. So it was these 2 kind of programmes that we were primarily kind of involved in. And I'll go through what we did there, because it's quite interesting just to see, I think, how knowledge exchange can work between the universities and the small business community, and what we kind of have done through that within the UK. And I know and appreciate that systems are very different. I completely get that. But I think it's also nice to kind of hear what goes on in other places. So LEAD and ideas are the ones that I'm kind of going to really move to talk through. So LEAD was a leading enterprise and development programme, and it supported skills development for over 3,000 small and medium-sized enterprise owners, and was seen to create around the 10,000 jobs. And this was all monitored and assessed from outside the university. So we didn't actually identify the results for this. It was an independent body which actually drove those as well. So there were 4 franchises which eventually operated from this LEAD programme, which was designed and developed by the university. There was a LEAD Northwest, South West London and Wales, and it was all developed at Lancaster. And LEAD's syllabus included action learning, coaching, shadowing, exchanges and reflection. And the LEAD programme itself featured on the BBC TV, Radio 4, and was also cited at government level. And the research, insights and impact of this particular programme informed the successful £32 million regional growth fund project, which I mentioned earlier on, around the Wave to Growth hubs, to support business growth in 20 UK cities. So it was a great achievement for us and for the university and for what we were doing, and fantastic recognition. So in the late 1990s, LEAD was established based on the wisdom that UK SME owner-managers and management teams displayed poor levels of managerial and leadership competence compared to what we had seen internationally. And furthermore, the kind of small, medium-sized enterprise owner-managers were disciplined to engage with their own personal development as business leaders. So it's very much about the leadership side of things. So the LEAD programme was informed by an initial project which was called Knowledge Exchange, and which explored diverse approaches to stimulating SME owner-managers to engage with development as leaders. And these forms of engagement led to an integrated learning model, which I've got up here, and this new kind of 2-month leadership development intervention, which focused on promoting business growth by developing the leadership abilities of smaller-sized enterprises. So this integrated learning model drew on lessons from this Knowledge Link programme, which has shown that diverse stimuli raised the importance of leadership, and this kind of multimodal syllabus elicited the strongest learning response from SME owner-managers. And the programme was further informed by an in-house expertise from what was termed as the Lancaster Leadership Centre, which was also based at Lancaster University. So again, it was knowledge exchange within the university, but also outside the university. So the Entrepreneurship Department at Lancaster piloted this first LEAD programme in 2004-06, which was funded by the North West Regional Development Agency, which is very much a government policy. And the pilot involved 67 delegates from 65 companies who joined cohorts. And the Entrepreneurship Department maintained continuous provision of LEAD since the pilot ended, with 1 or 2 cohorts being launched each year. So it was a large number of people that were being pulled through. And each cohort of approximately 25 growth-orientated business owners covered a range of business sectors. An independent evaluation of the pilot showed that 90% of participants reported significant increases in profitability, employability, or sales turnover. So LEAD was all about working on the business, not in the business. And the LEAD programme sought to go beyond the usual management offerings to business and to develop skills and abilities based on research observation relating to reflective and experiential learning. And that was the thing that we really wanted to create, was this whole kind of experiential learning. And the programme involves engaging participants, not only with tutors, but also with each other in kind of peer-to-peer learning groups. And these networks persisted after the 10-month LEAD programme and are encouraged through continuing participation, because after LEAD there was this programme which was initiated, which was called Gold, which again I'm sure you'll be able to see if you have a look on the side, which was the next stage, or what we saw as being the next stage of the LEAD programme. And the involvement of key personnel in running and researching LEAD maintained the link between research and practice, and that for us was the whole point, was it was this knowledge exchange and this kind of link between the world of research and the world of practice, but also ensuring that the programme continued to meet the needs of participants, so what these owner-managers really needed and what would help them. And around 40% of participants on the Northwest LEAD programme were introduced to it by past participants, so a lot of it was actually word of mouth. That's how a lot of people came to it. And researchers continue to conduct longitudinal research into the impact of LEAD on both company performance, financial, innovation, procedural and strategic issues, and the business trajectories of participating entrepreneurs. And at Lancaster, they also have this very active programme and body of entrepreneurs in residence. And a lot of these people came through the LEAD programme as well. So they've remained engaged with the university through choice. So business outcomes and effects, and there were various things that came through from the thing, from the LEAD. So you've got, across all businesses, the mean annual sales was £105,000 and a growth rate of 3.5% a year. And for those experiencing an increase in turnover, the mean sales increase across the body was about the 360,000 a year. All these figures are available on the website if you have a look as well. And they found that labour productivity improved, as well as profit, sales, and kind of every participant as well commented on how much they felt their own leadership skills had developed. And that was kind of the key thing for us as well, was this kind of improvement in the leadership skills. So as a result of the research, the LEAD team was approached in June 2013, as I mentioned earlier before, by the UK government to develop this £32 million regional growth fund bid to support a growth agenda in 20 cities and their wider areas across England. And it was a very quick kind of piece of work that had to be done. So it started in 2013, and by 2015 it had to be done. And it was interesting because what we did was we saw it as an opportunity as well to kind of run a research programme alongside it. So again, it was the knowledge exchange working back and forth. I'll now move as well to speak about ideas, and this was probably the one that I was more engaged of these two projects. And the Innovation, Design, Entrepreneurship and Science programme, as also known as IDEAS, and basically it worked with 60 technology-focused small and medium-sized enterprises to explore how they could be supported to facilitate growth. And workshops were conducted at Daresbury Science and Innovation Campus. And these workshops resulted in 55 jobs being created and 10 safeguarded. And this was built around my work, but also primarily around the work of somebody who just completed their PhD, and that was Danny Sotanto, who very much engaged with the workshops and running and facilitating the whole thing. And the programme provided business owners with an understanding of their networks, and that's what we were looking to do, based on research indicating that business growth can be stimulated by optimising the variety of contacts available to them. And the successful application of these concepts at Daresbury contributed to the generation of approximately £13.1 million of funding for new regional, national and international programmes, which then supported a further 2,900 SMEs. I don't think I've got that up there, but yeah. So the IDEAS programme stemmed from longitudinal and collaborative studies into entrepreneurial networks, and also the work that Lancaster University had done, which was very much about specialising in developing and delivering research-led programmes for small and medium-sized enterprises, and that was kind of the strength of the unit as well. So their engagement and outreach activity with business informs and enriches research and facilitates knowledge exchange. So the central idea was to get businesses to use reflective skills to develop networks, empowering firms to boost their development and growth. And this approach contrasts really with the standard array of intellectual property, finance and basic management courses, which are usually available to the high-tech, small, medium-sized enterprise. So the Ideas programme drew on my work on the role of networks in entrepreneurship and how they are affected by social capital, and also the work of Danny Soltanto, who'd been very much engaged at looking at things like incubators and science parks, especially through his work. And I suppose that in my work, I observe that strong ties may be latent, but can nonetheless be bonded by trust and reciprocity, and may therefore be reactivated when the interest between the entrepreneur and the contact is matched. And these strong ties, although inactive, can be considered as latent knowledge and a resource for the entrepreneur. So networking is then a process that takes place over time, a dynamic relationship, and as a process involves shifting latent contacts to manifest ties. So in the particular piece of work that fed into that project, I conclude that by using social networks, entrepreneurial action can convert limited resources into a very rich environment. Therefore, nascent and embryonic and potential entrepreneurs should be aware of the advantages of using and developing appropriate networks. And that was kind of the foundations, I suppose, for this. So the research provided insight into the relative usefulness of various types of contacts at different stages of enterprise growth, and it questioned the usefulness of artificially created networks through formal business organizations and events committees, clubs compared to networks with contacts developed through professional trust in an industry. And the study revealed the following kind of key findings. The use of strong ties to create broad visions of the future and to develop innovations. And here we were bringing people together, and that's what it was very focused on again, this whole idea of bringing people together. And the propensity of entrepreneurs not to cut ties, but rather to transfer them to colleagues. So if somebody felt that somebody within their network wasn't particularly relevant, it was that transferring process that was also interesting. And also the practice of bringing strong ties inside the organization through advisory, managerial, or directorial positions. So the Ideas project at Daresbury supported 60 new technology businesses in the area over a period of 16 months from March 2009. And the Ideas programme exceeded most of the original targets submitted to its stakeholders, including businesses supported were 60 compared to the target of 40. Jobs created were 55, the target had been 5, and jobs were safeguarded. So the Ideas programme promoted effective knowledge exchange at the interface between small, medium-sized enterprises, university, and strategic government-funded science. Daresbury is very much a science park. And the programme was delivered through a series of short but highly interactive workshop programmes which Danny led, master classes, academic mentoring, and student projects. And this resulted in significant improvements in the businesses which were supported. And these drew on 4 research groups, the business and management schools at Lancaster, Liverpool, and Manchester, and also a unit called Imagination Lancaster, which is very much a kind of design-led research lab. And these kind of came together and worked together to deliver. And this collaboration allowed firms to benefit from the wider networks of the partner institutions, so it wasn't just one institution which was key here. But I think as well where universities can probably have the greatest impact is on our students, and by instilling them with current knowledge and understanding through the research we do, but also by looking at what we care about. We can share our passions and engender a real kind of life learning approach within our students. But more importantly, we can ensure our students are relevant to the changing modern world and ready for the workplace. And this is why I think research-led teaching is so important, because what we as researchers do is bring perspectives, new ideas, and fresh approaches to hopefully solve very complex problems which business owners, and many of you here today, have to deal with. But what we also do is emphasize the development of students as active researchers, reflective thinkers, and problem solvers. And I think that's a very key part of what we do and what our role is. So I suppose going back to the 3 key questions. And why are social relationships and networks critical assets for entrepreneurs? I've kind of tried to summarize things here, but there's lots more that probably could be said. So there's a provision of the opportunity for knowledge exchange, and that is very key for what particularly entrepreneurs are doing and small business owners, and that whole kind of ability to exchange knowledge. But also They bring resources, and resources don't just have to be economic resources, they can also be social resources, and I think it's important as well to bear that in mind. But at the same time, they're very socially motivated and socially created rather than artificially created, and I think it's this social aspect that is really key. We're all social animals, social beings, and we like to mingle with other people. But also they help co-create visions, innovations, and entrepreneurship. How can universities support entrepreneurs in a better way? I think it's about providing forums and building opportunities for social learning and bringing individuals together, but very much within neutral ground. And I think as well, that coming back to Esbri and what you're doing here today, I think this is another forum that provides that. It's that neutral territory which I think is important. Also, there's research-led opportunities and working to support growth and development and ensuring things are very current. But also building and developing students who can operate in a global marketplace. And the world is increasingly changing, becoming more challenging, and it's this global aspect which is becoming increasingly important. How can we understand entrepreneurship in different contexts? So it's important to bear in mind that entrepreneurship takes place in context. And context shapes entrepreneurship, but entrepreneurship can also shape the context in which it operates. Context and cultures are very different across the world, and neither are the same. Hence, it's important to understand what is happening on the ground. One size doesn't fit all. That's something that increasingly worries me when I see the extent and the amount of particularly quantitative work which is done. And this has implications for how we do business, but also how we expand into global markets. And I think it's very important to be able to understand a context and a culture and what's happening within that. I think very early when I started my career, I realized that actually contexts are very different, cultures are very different, and we need to bear that in mind. And what works in one doesn't always work in another. So I've also got a small video that, have we got time to show the video? Or, yeah? I'll show you, I'll see you this. This relates to the SIMRA project. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go, should be it. And this is hot off the press because this only came through yesterday afternoon. No sound. Oh.
We propose a structure agency framework based on a multi-level approach that serves to identify the key elements for evaluation. Social innovation is defined as the reconfiguring of social practices in response to societal challenges, which seeks to enhance outcomes on societal well-being and necessarily includes the engagement of civil society actors. Social innovation often comes from triggers and needs, which occur at different spatial and temporal scales. A trigger may be the sparkling light or the last drop that makes the cup run over, while needs refer to the unmet social needs of vulnerable groups, societal challenges, and governance shifts. Triggers and needs can spur agents to start actions towards social innovation at the local level, but it all begins from an idea. The egg represented in the video refers to a constellation of actors interested in supporting transformative actions towards collective benefits. Broadly, agency may include values, ideas, and a capacity and willingness to act for change. We refer to this first group of innovators and followers as a core group. These first agents conduct preparatory actions, introducing the idea, raising awareness, connecting to others, and meeting informally, searching for funds. When this happens, the egg is hatched. During these initial stages, agents may be constrained or enabled by their context and perceive it differently. The perceived context may be analyzed through both context data and perceptions of opportunities and threats, what we refer to as pot. In the pot, elements from 4 domains are mixed together: economic, environmental, social, and institutional. Given the interactions between agents and their context, actors will initiate a process of reconfiguring governance arrangements, networks, including public and private actors, and attitudes. These will ultimately lead to reconfigure social and institutional practices. In addition to the core group, other actors join the process during this phase, undertaking more active roles as transformers or less active ones as mainstreamers. Altogether, they create the social innovation network. The newly reconfigured situation establishes a threshold between what we refer to as the process of social innovation and the project of social innovation. The project activities, procedures, and practices sustain the initiative operationally with regular outputs such as services and products, outcomes, and, over a long-term perspective, impacts. Over time, new project implementers may join in. All the previously mentioned actors, together with beneficiaries of the project, its services and products, represent the social innovation community. Social innovation is novel. Through upscaling, these new ideas may be reproduced and institutionalized in other locations as well. At this point, it is possible to reflect back on the factors which supported the initiative and the ones which could have hindered or interrupted the social innovation process, thus leading to the learning process. This evaluation framework allows evaluators to analyze the different stages of social innovation and the perspectives of the actors that progressively became involved in the initiative. However, the pathways of social innovation follow different routes, and it may be difficult to trace the impacts on the alleviation of needs and the enhancement of well-being more broadly. We have more questions and more work needs to be done. We thank our CIMRA partners in advance for the work ahead.
Yeah!
Okay, so has anybody got any questions? I thought it was quite nice, actually. The video arrived just yesterday afternoon, so I thought the timing of it couldn't have been better. It's a bit more kind of light-hearted to see something like that as well, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay, questions? Thoughts? Yes?
Thank you for a nice talk, Sarah. I was just wondering, you talked about the importance of creating reflective and problem-solving students. Could you just please elaborate on how does the schools and universities do that? Well, you know, in practical terms, what could be done?
Yeah, and it's yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question in itself, but I suppose, it's about engaging students, and I have to say I find the students here very, very much engaged at SSE, but it's how you engage them, but also I think it's about engaging them in the real world as quickly as you can or as soon as you can. And throughout my academic experience, we've always kind of engaged students with entrepreneurs, so they very much understand and appreciate what actually is happening. But then bringing them back into the classroom to kind of, I suppose, break that down, to think it through and to work with them, to really kind of nail it down, you know, what people are doing, how they're doing it, but also how they could maybe do it better. But also linking it to theory and what theoretical developments are going on. So then they can see how the things happen and drives them forward, I would hope. And I think that's a critical thing. But also, it was quite before I came here, I was having a chat with some people over lunch, and they were saying that they've just had students come back from a trip to Uganda. And that in itself was a very eye-opening experience. So I suppose it's being brave enough as well to take students to the real kind of situations that are going on across the world, and to see what is happening. And I think that there's so many things that are happening nowadays that, you know, if you can find ways to bring those into the classroom, I think that builds better students as well, and more realistic. Does that answer your question?
Okay, do we have more questions?
It's still sunny outside.
Yes. Okay.
Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope it's been helpful at some level. And thank you for being so welcoming. Okay.
Yes. Thank you for sharing your research with us. We have a little present for you. We support UNICEF's School in a Box, another way of disseminate knowledge, and we like that, so we support it. We also like recycling, so this is a bowl from recycled glass from Torstensson Art. So thank you, and thank you for coming. Next lecture is on May 24, so we hope we see you then. Thank you.